Let's talk about a modern drum mixing workflow. What tools am I using that are modern and super helpful that are allowing me to mix drums faster and more accurately? Let's do it. So, in the modern day and age, and especially in the last few years, there have been massive improvements in plugins that enable us to mix drums way faster than we used to. Mixing drums traditionally is a pretty laborious process. It involves lots of technical knowledge and know-how and expertise, and it can be a really tricky thing to conquer. There are still lots of those elements involved, but there are now also tools that help you a lot with those things and help you get to a much more professional sounding result very quickly. I want to take you through my exact workflow as it is at the moment and show you step by step what I do to prepare drum recordings for mixing and then how I get a quick mix kind of up and running. Quick disclaimer, I'm going to show you a bunch of plugins today. I'm not affiliated with any of them. They're getting no kickback from me. I'm getting no kickback. This is just the stuff that I'm currently using that I think you might want to see. So here we go. We've got a standard drum recording, single kick mic, snare top, snare bottom, hi-hat, a rack and a floor, an overhead mono, which I'm not going to bother with, stereo overheads, and a mono room. So pretty standard drum recording. I've just done a quick level balance of those things. It sounds like this. Okay, normal sounding drum recording, pretty well recorded. If we listen to the mics in isolation, all sounding fine. There's obviously some bleed from the kick, from the snare top, from the snare bottom. Looks like the toms have already been gated out, so there's no bleed on those. You can hear some bleed on the actual hits coming through. So you can hear there's a bit of kind of cymbal fuzz coming through, or fizz. But, you know, that's all normal for a drum recording, right? Assuming this is all edited and we're happy with the actual performance that we've got to work with, what do I do with this first? The first thing that I want to check absolutely is phase alignment, because phase alignment is going to make sure that each microphone is sounding the very best that it can, that we're not losing any kind of content with phase cancellation. Traditionally, that's something you need to really understand. You probably have to go and adjust things by hand, which of course you can still do, but there are now tools that do a lot of that heavy lifting for you. The one that I'm using all the time is called AutoAlign 2. It's this plugin right here. So how it works is you have to put an instance of it on every track that you want to check the phase alignment for. Every track needs a unique name in order for the plugin to kind of identify them. You'll see in here that it knows whether it's a stereo or a mono track. So the overhead stereo there, it knows is a left and a right channel, and everything else it knows is a mono channel. Now what I want to do here is phase align all of these microphones except the room microphone. Why? Well, because all of the microphones that are close miking the drum kit are all, you know, very close together. Equally, the overheads on the drum kit are very close to the instrument. So I want those close mics to all be phase coherent. The room microphone is going to be a distance away from the drum kit. So that is not going to have any phase issues. It's not going to do any phase cancellation with the microphones that are close miking. So I don't need to worry about the phase correlation of that one. So I'm actually just going to remove the plugin from that channel completely. I can mute that channel for now. Now all I have to do is hit align and then play 30 seconds or more of music through this plugin. Here we go. All right, done. That's going to have a little think, and then it'll go, boom, there you go. And it's going to adjust every channel to put them in phase with each other. Now you'll see that the kick channel has got a 0 on it. So it means that that channel hasn't moved at all. It's decided that that's going to be the one that it's going to phase align everything else to. And everything else has moved by various amounts to phase align with that kick channel. So you'll see, for example, the snare top has been adjusted by 192, I think it's samples, I assume it's samples, to be in phase with the kick. The snare bottom, 282 samples, the overheads, 212, and so on. So let's A/B this. Let's remind ourselves of how it sounds bypassed, and then I'm going to engage the AutoAlign 2 plugin. So I hope you're hearing a massive difference there, especially on the kick and snare. They go from being fine, but, you know, fairly kind of weedy and not particularly delicious, to being much more full-bodied and round and with much more tone, which is obviously what we want. You can do that process by hand, of course, but to have a plugin that just goes, there you go, it's done, is a massive time saver. So that's the first thing that I do. Once that's done, I don't need that plugin anymore. It's done its job. So what I then do is print all those channels out so I can get rid of that plugin. So it's a bit laborious again, but I'll select one track at a time and I'll bounce in place that channel, can get rid of the original and move that back onto its channel. And I can keep going with all of these channels and do the same. Now, of course, if you're a little bit terrified of losing things, if you're terrified of committing to things, you can bounce it and then you can, you know, mute and hide the original channel so that it's still there if you want to go back. Of course, you can do that. I have no problem with committing to something that's been phase aligned. So that's the way that I do it, but, you know, you do it the way that you're comfortable. I'm going to quickly run through the rest of these channels. So phase alignment done. We can hear that now. So I can go and get rid of these plugins. Done their work, no longer need them. Great. The next piece of work I'm going to do is that I'm going to clean up some of these channels. Traditionally, you do this with gating, of course, but there are better tools these days that allow us to do that gating thing, but without having to worry about thresholds and attack and release times and those sorts of things. And very often, you know, a traditional gate is imperfect. It's very difficult to dial in a perfect gate setting because there is dynamic variety in a performance. Of course, if you've got a drummer that's super even and plays stuff really, really evenly, then the gating process becomes easier. But that's, you know, not the norm. Often you'll have a range of dynamics and it becomes difficult. So what plugin am I going to use then? I'm going to use a plugin called ReStem. Now, ReStem likes to work on stereo channels. So I'm going to make my kick, snare top, snare bottom stereo channels, and then I'm going to place an instance of ReStem on my kick channel. It looks like this from Wave Machine Labs. What it allows us to do is to, you know, it uses whatever algorithm, AI, whatever it has hidden within this plugin to allow us to remove bits of sound from the channel. So what we have to do is hit record. We have to record all of the audio into the plugin. So that's the whole channel, which of course is a bit laborious and a bit boring, but it's worth it. And once it's recorded, it'll then analyze it, and then we can remove some of the other sound content from that channel. So let's record in the kick. Okay, so the kick is recorded in. It'll now have a think about it. It's going to analyze that audio. You can see the progress bar zipping up there. Obviously, the longer the audio is that you've had to record in, the longer that'll take. But once it's thought about it, you will then be able to remove bits of the sound from that channel, let's have a little play with that. What a massive difference that makes. Now, you do have to be a little careful, because if you go too aggressively with some controls, it can get a little kind of glitchy and you can kind of hear it being a little bit algorithmic. So you have to use your ears, you have to be musical about it. But the great thing is, with my process anyway, that if I can hear a little bit of weirdness, a bit of algorithmic reduction in the background, what I'm going to do later in this process is going to get rid of that even more anyway. So once I'm happy with the sound that I've made, again, what I can do is commit that channel. So I've bounced that channel away. Now what that's actually going to have done, of course, because it's stereo, is give me a stereo channel. So I'll make that channel mono and then bounce that out so that I've got my original mono kick channel back where I want it. I'll put that back up here, and then I can get rid of that plugin. And of course, as I said previously, if you're worried about committing to sounds like that and you want to keep a channel pre-ReStem hidden in your project, by all means do that. So I'm quickly going to do exactly the same process with the snare top and the snare bottom. Let's do the snare top together. So let's grab my ReStem plugin. As before, I need to record it in. Okay, so snare top is recorded in, same as before. It's going to analyze that, have a think about it, look at the audio that's in that and figure out what it can remove. So here we go. Let's see what we can do here. So you hear there, as I'm going too aggressively on this hi-hat reduction, it's having an audible impact on the way that snare top is sounding. So I need to be cautious here to make sure that I'm not impacting too negatively the actual sound of the microphone. So I'm going to back that back off to a level where I feel like that snare top is not being destroyed in any way. So that's a pretty good place for me. I've still got the full tail of the snare decay. I've still got the attack, but everything else has been reduced in that microphone. So that's sounding good to me. Again, I'm going to commit that to a new region, bounce that out. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing with the snare bottom. I'll do that without wasting your time. Cool, and we're back. And I've done exactly the same thing with the snare bottom and in fact the hi-hat as well. Although the hi-hat has already been edited somewhat, I've also got rid of some of the additional bleed that's going on there. Of course, if I had rack tom and floor tom that hadn't been edited already, I could do exactly the same process with those. No need in this instance. Where do I go from here then? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do some further gating. What am I going to use for that? The next thing that I'm going to turn to is a plugin called Silencer. This is from Black Salt Audio, and again, it's a gate, but it works in a different way. So I'm going to solo out my kick. I'm going to tell the plugin that I'm working on a kick drum, and then I'm going to dial in this gate. So that's basically got rid of all the rest of the stuff that was still getting through a little bit. Now, of course, I can play with the overall reduction amount. So if I want it to not reduce as much or reduce more, I've got that there. I can adjust the length of the tail, which is effectively the release time on the gate, if I want the release to be a little longer or a bit shorter. But in this case, I'm all good with it. Let's look at the snare top as well. We'll do exactly the same process here on the snare top. Make sure the plugin knows it's a snare top. Cool, and making sure that the threshold is low enough to get those little roughs and ghost notes as well. Happy with that. Again, I could adjust the length on the tail if I wanted to. I'm good with it. Let's do the snare bottom, turn it to the snare bottom setting. So a really low threshold on this because I still want those snare sounds coming through from the other components of the drum kit. So when the kick drum is played, that's going to be affecting the snares underneath the snare drum. So I want to make sure that I'm still getting all of that snare information coming through. Sounds great. Again, likewise, I could do the same on the toms that I got if they weren't already kind of gated out. So I've used Silencer. Next thing that I'm going to do is use a plugin called Drum Leveler. Now what this is going to do is allow me to even out the dynamics of the drum, so make a more consistent performance. So let me do that for you here. So what is this plugin doing? First thing I've done is to set a target level. So that's the level at which every hit is going to be adjusted towards. So I've positioned that roughly where the loudest hit is. So as I was looking through, I was looking for where's the loudest hit and then setting this. It's a threshold effectively, setting that there. Then I've got a low threshold, which I can adjust. And this is to tell the plugin anything that is within the threshold range affect, but anything that's below that low threshold, you're not going to do anything about, you'll ignore. And then you've got this, what it calls compression amount. It's not really compression. What it's effectively doing is riding the fader. It's effectively doing automation in real time. So it's saying, okay, this hit here, which has got a bit more orange in it, that's a fair bit below this target level. I'm going to move that 70% in this case, because I've got 70% set here. I'm going to move that 70% from wherever that hit was towards that target level. So whatever 70% of that is, I'm going to turn it up. And obviously every hit is different. So it's for every hit analyzing and going, okay, let's make that 70% towards the target. So it's effectively riding the fader in real time to give you a more consistent drum performance in terms of dynamic. Importantly though, it's not doing any triggering, it's not doing any drum replacement. So you've still got all of the tonal differences of a unique strike. So every hit still sounds different as it does with a real performance. But the difference is that you've got a more consistent dynamic to give you a drum mix that is easier to mix. So let's just check that out in this plugin once more. We can A/B it, bypass it, and then put it back on. So you can hear with it off, there's quite a wide range of dynamic variety. And with it on, I've got a more consistent range of dynamics. The range is much smaller. What that means is that when I get to things like compression later on, I don't have to compress as aggressively because my dynamic range is smaller, which means that I can keep more of the original character of the drum, which is great. I'm going to do exactly the same thing with the snare top and the snare bottom. So let's get my drum leveler plug-in here, and let's do the same on the snare top. Now, importantly, with the snare top, I want to make sure that the ghost notes and the roughs that are coming through are below this low threshold. Because if I move that low threshold to include that information, it's going to sound really wild as it tries to pull that up 70% towards the target level. Let me show you what that sounds like. Okay, wild. So definitely don't want that. So that's why you need to be careful and understand what that does. Okay, but that's sounding great to me. I'm going to do the same thing with the snare bottom. Let's hear what this sounds like. Now, some people might actually want to hear more of the snare bottom on the ghost notes and on the other elements of the kit. So we could actually include those and be less aggressive with the compression setting. Let's see how that sounds. So that's kind of cool. It means that I'm hearing that snare rattle on all the different component parts of the drum kit, which I like. So I'm actually going to go with that. As you can see, a less aggressive compression, a mount down at 33%. So it's, not working so hard, but it is bringing up the level of those what were very quiet hits a bit in order to make them more audible in my mix. So loving that. I can, of course, do the same thing on my rack and on my floor if I want to. I'm going to leave those alone for the time being. So massive difference being made, giving me much more control over each element and enabling me to be more controlled over my mix in general. The next thing that I'm going to do here is with my overheads. So here are my overheads, and what I'm going to try and do here is make these more of a cymbal channel, so remove some of the other information from this channel. For that, I'm going to use a plugin called Acon Drums. So it gives me this kind of mixer, and it's going to allow me to remove bits of information from it. Let's do it. So definitely giving me much more control over that channel as well. Here's all of that together. And then I've still got my room channel. So here's the room on its own. Now, my issue with that is that I want to hear the shells in the room. I want the drums, but I don't want all that cymbal. So I can get rid of some of the sound of the cymbals in the room, which is going to allow me to do more with that channel, more with that information. So all together. Now, if I want more room, if I want more bang for my buck, as it were, with the room, what I can then do is actually to make a faux room. So to make a fake room that I can then blend in with everything else. So let's call this bus faux room. So I've sent just the shells to that channel. I've sent the kick, the snares, and the toms. And in fact, with these snares, rather than sending them individually, I'm going to put them on one track stack, and then I can just send the track stack. Only needs to be mono. Likewise, with the toms, I can do the same thing. So I can send them to a toms bus, and they can also go to our fake room. I want to make sure that they're all going to the same output. So I've made a bus for everything, all of my drum components, and I'm going to put everything going out of the same drum bus. So let's make sure we've got everything labeled here. Snare bus, toms bus. The snare can be mono. The toms need to be in stereo because they've got panning information. And then I can send the snare and the toms to that same faux room. Now, on the faux room, obviously that's just a channel at the moment. So what I want is this plugin called Sound City Studios. You could use any plugin that has got the ability to generate a room sound. I love this from UAD. I think it sounds great. Now, in this instance, all I'm going to do to get me going quickly is to grab a preset. So I'm going to go to my menu. I'm going to search for drums. And let's say I want a big rock drum room. Cool. It's going to configure the room for that with various microphones and all that sort of stuff. And then you've got two miking options, remic and reverb. So remic, use remic mode to mix through Sound City Studios. So remic mode entirely replaces your recording with the studio's complete room and microphone characteristics. It retains the source to mic direct path component. Whereas reverb is a mix of the Sound City Studios with the existing recordings. So it's more like an insert rather than a send, if you like. So I want the remic option in this instance. And then what I'm going to do is send my, let's start with the snare to that room. So let's solo the room, and then we're going to send the snare to it. So great room sound straight away. I'm going to put some kick in that room as well. And some toms. Cool, and then that's getting a bit muddy for a room sound, so I'm going to just filter that a little bit here. And that gives me a really workable kind of fake room sound. So let's blend that back in with my drum kit sound as a whole. straight away giving me an awesome room sound. I've got control over the overheads because they're not going to get squashed too much in the room channels. And equally, I'm not going to get too many issues in the overheads if I try and EQ or squash them, and it will do weird things to the kick and the snare. So that sounds great. Obviously, there's a load more processing that I could do on these things individually, but I'm not going to worry about that just for now. I'm just going to show you what I then do on my drum bus as a whole. So something that I'd have on there straight away is the X saturator from SSL. This I normally just stick on set and forget. I normally don't touch it at all. Just sounds great. It's just bringing the kit together a bit, giving it a bit of glue, which I think sounds awesome. Then I would normally limit very subtly. So I just want to start taming the peaks of this drum kit. I would normally set it on auto release, put the look ahead on, and I want it to be transparently limiting. I don't want it to be doing anything to my sound per se. I just want it to be transparently limiting. I'm going to set the ceiling at -6 because that's where I like my drums to be sitting. I'm going to set the threshold, therefore, at the same place. And if I'm not quite getting any reduction or no real reduction on those snare hits, I can always trim my gain up so I'm getting a little bit of reduction on those snare hits. Cool, so, just getting some gain reduction of around 5-6 decibels on those snare hits. And then the last thing that I put on my drum bus is BSA drum bus. So the same company that makes Silencer. And this is a great drum bus processor. It's got a bunch of dials that you have there to adjust, but importantly, you're not getting too flummoxed with attack and release and all sorts of different, and a saturation amount and everything else. You can just use your ears rather than having to know the technical warehouse, which is really helpful. So I'm going to dial this in. So I'm looking for around kind of 3 decibels of reduction on a snare strike and about 1 on a kick. So that's why I'm using the high pass filter to get the kick reduction just where I want, and using the overall compression amount for the overall snare hit. A bit of transient enhancement here with the attack control, which allows me to kind of get a bit more snap on the drums. The heat is giving me saturation. The tone allows you to make the kit brighter or darker, depending on what it is that you want. And then salt is a little bit of secret sauce. So, a bit more glued, bit more saturated, bit more together with everything. And I can see that I'm going a little bit louder than what I want, so I'm then going to back off this output level by 1.7 in order to match the input level. So, drum bus before. And that is kind of where I would get to in terms of my drum mixing process as a starting point. I haven't done anything to the individual channels yet. No EQ, no compression on the individual channels. This is all just setting up my sound, and it already sounds great. So, you know, once I go in and start dialing in the tone of those drums, the tone of the kick, the tone of the snare, the tone of those toms, that's when this workflow really starts to shine. Don't forget, if you've got any questions or comments, or you want me to make some content on anything specific, drop those down below. Do all those things like and share and subscribe. That would be really helpful. I'll see you again soon.